Good afternoon. I will call this Finance Committee meeting budget work session to order. In front of us, we have an agenda. How would the committee like to move forward?
Motion to approve the agenda, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Unfinished business, we have none. We'll move on to the new business, discuss proposed FY 2023-24 operating fund, miscellaneous items, and capital projects fund. Dr. Hummer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we have a couple items that we are going to be discussing today. First, we're going to have Mrs. Anderson come up and follow up with all of the questions that were presented to the Finance and Budget Committee. We'll go through those. Then we're going to have Mrs. Camry come up and talk through the other miscellaneous items for the operating budget. And then we'll have Mr. Chrisman come up and talk about the Capital Projects Fund. And then we also have an additional item that I will be discussing with you all at the end of this meeting to talk about the different scenarios that the county is proposing with the different tax rates. So there is a document in your binder that we just shared with you, and that was also to the public as well, shared with the public. So we're going to go through that and make sure there aren't any questions about that as well. So I'm going to hand it off now to Mrs. Anderson. Thank you.
To go through these questions?
Perfect. Thank
Okay.
you so much.
So we'll jump right into the questions that we received from last week's meeting. The first of which is to follow up on our discussion about taking the $15 per hour proposal up to $17 and how that would cost an estimated $5 million more. And wanted an understanding around the calculation for that. So let me start off by saying that the calculation is more complex than multiplying $2 additional for all of our classified staffs. It would be imprudent to significantly increase our classified scale without also addressing our other scales, specifically the teachers and the other professionals, because of pay differentials. Increasing to the 17, I'm sorry, let me back up. Increasing from our current 13 to 15, the total cost of that initiative is $2.6 million. So to go another $2 up would double that cost, okay? So that makes up more than half of the $5 million. But then we have to also look at our teacher and other professional scale because of those pay differentials. Pay differentials measure requirements of the job relative to another job, and it looks at those expectations such as education, experience, skills, and responsibilities necessary for those jobs. So just two quick examples of that out of our many examples. We have to look at a teacher to an assistant, as well as a degreed accountant to a bookkeeper, and another example would be a technician to an engineer. And then additionally, because the greatest group to benefit from this initiative are our school nutrition staff. That 2.6 doesn't include the cost for those because they are funded separately under the school nutrition fund. That's a self-serving fund. To increase to $17, the school operating fund would have to pick up that cost because we wouldn't want to pass that cost on to our students and their families through the prices that they pay for their meals, as well as we would also have to pick up the cost on our NREP and our consolidated services or our mechanic employees. The next question, can you provide a breakdown of what each of the new positions? We provided that information on February 9th. It's in your packet. It's the first sheet following the slide deck. I'll give you a minute to get there. And if you would like it in a different format, we will certainly provide that for you.
There it is.
Okay. Question 3, where would the behavior specialist pay initiative be placed? We're proposing that they be on the professional scale, pay grade P9, which is the same as our speech pathologists. Question 4 gets into, you noticed on what did not make it to the budget proposal was taking our bus drivers and assistants up to a 5.5-hour day contract. We did not poll our bus drivers because we didn't include this in our proposal, simply because we need to collect more information. Second part of the question, currently when drivers do more than their 4.5-hour shift for an extra run, how much and where are they paid from? So all of our drivers and assistants are paid 22.5 hours per week, which is the equivalent of 4.5 per day, for their regular bus routes to and from school. Due to the driver shortage this year, we're also paying our drivers an additional $10 for every additional route that they pick up. Each route per day per route. If they drive more than the 22 and a half hours per week, they're paid their hourly rate up to 40 hours a week. Past 40, they're paid an overtime rate. And those funds are coming from both a combination of savings that we're getting because we have driving positions that are vacant, as well as we have a budget in extra overtime and part-time wages. Question 5, we heard from a current parent liaison at the budget hearing about the need for more liaisons. The budget proposal only includes an additional one for Millbrook High School, and that's simply because 13% of their enrollment are students are receiving English language learners, and that's higher relative to the other schools. Question 6 about pre-K. The total cost for a pre-K classroom, normal operating cost is about $153,000, of which $90,000 comes from the state. The remaining comes up from the local funds, and that includes a teacher, an assistant, and supplies. But to have a startup or a brand new classroom, that's an additional estimated $80,000 for playground equipment as well as furniture, if the classroom was to be added to a school that doesn't currently have a pre-K classroom, because we would need to make sure we had age-appropriate playground equipment. When adding in additional instructional aids, that cost is $35,000, which includes benefits. And that concludes the questions from last week. So now I'll turn it over to Mrs. Camry if there's no other questions.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the operating fund now. And what's important for us to realize is that after today, hallelujah, I know you're all excited, is then we'll be finished covering everything that's in the proposed budget from the operating fund. And that's why later on, as Dr. Hummer said, that Mr. Chrisman will come up and talk about preventive maintenance that is in operating, but also the capital asset plan that's in the capital projects fund, so the separate fund there. So first of all, I'd like to start talking about buses. So thank you, John, for coming, wherever he is. There he is. So he is here also to answer any questions you may have. As you know, we have 4 recurring buses in our budget, operating budget now. So that means the funds are there every year for us to purchase 4 buses, which is where we want them. Now, we have purchased some buses in the capital plan, but when we do that, you know that's non-recurring dollars, so they go away. That's why it's so important for us to keep building this base of buses in the operating fund. What's included in the proposal this year is 2 more. So we've added 2 in the last 2 years. We'd like 2 more in the upcoming year to give us 6 recurring buses every year. The next slide gives you what that inventory looks like based on the mileage and the age of those buses. If you look at that, you can see that 34 buses are over the age of 21. So we're getting kind of close to, of our recycling may be going up because if we don't replace enough, the 13 may not be enough to replace. It may go up even higher. But at this point, we still are close to 13 needing to replace. It's probably inching up to 14 pretty soon. And also you can see that there are 25 buses with over 250,000 miles. And I'll hold and pause just for a second because you see at the top there are 249 active buses. And we have 13 that are inactive, meaning we're using parts off of that. Mr. Grubbs is here if you have any questions for him. So I'm just going to pause and see.
I do. Mr. Grubbs, thank you so much for being here. If you don't mind sharing with the board and the public in regards to the shelf life of a bus, and I know there's a difference between a diesel and a gas. If you can kind of talk through, because we're seeing your 6 buses over 300,000 miles, I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but if you can kind of explain that to us, if you can come on up, that would be great. Thank you, Mr. Grubbs.
Thank you, sir. Members of the committee, sorry I was a little late. I was blocked in by armed traffic. Parents picking up. Right now, we have a lot of gasoline buses, a lot of diesel buses. What we're running into right now is we're looking at these buses to the point where we're fighting mileage, we're fighting rust, we're fighting big repairs, costly repairs. And one of the things that, as far as the lifespan, it's hard to determine because we have buses that are fairly new. When I say fairly new, 10 years old, that we're having to spend money on because we need the bus. So it makes a determination. We have to come to a point where, can we fix a bus, and is it worth fixing the bus? That's the big thing. And so right now, I do know that we do get gasoline. Buses, that's the cheapest way to make repairs. And buses have hard miles, stop, start, you know that. But we do have quite a few buses that are over 20 years old. We have, and I made me some notes here if I can find them, but we have buses that are not just miles, but even some of the other ones, when you get into a diesel repair, you're looking at ones that injectors, engines, when you have to replace those, they're very costly for diesel. So even the service for a gasoline bus is cheaper, less oil, filters, and so forth. And you don't have to add DEF, that's that additive for the exhaust. So it's hard to say exactly how long they last because there's no rhyme or reason. We do not have in Virginia a timeline to say buses need to be replaced at 15 years or anything like that. Some counties do. I reached out to Clark County today. They have an unwritten rule that is about 15 years. Loudoun County, I believe, is 13. I didn't get any answer from some of the other counties I called. I couldn't reach them. But we don't have anything like that. But we are doing the best we can with what we have. And I can tell you our shop is top notch. Yep.
Thank you, sir.
Sir.
Thank you.
And if I can add, you do have the capital asset plan, and if you look on page 61 through 65, that is the inventory for all buses that we have at this point in time. That's a new addition to the plan this year. And we're hoping to expand it out to include trip cars later on, maybe next year, but that just is kind of a first stab at getting some information out there for you to see. And if there's no other questions, I can continue. So also in the operating budget, we have some funds, $20,755 for WIDA, which is a testing that measures the proficiency in language and skills for our English language learners. It does it in reading, listening, writing, and speaking. These funds are helped to cover the cost of the increase of ELL students, so the increase, of course, of testing. Also, it's the cost of the test is going up, as well as we're going to need more proctors to oversee the test. So those funds would cover all those things that we need. Also, you heard that Dr. Angelo was very happy, and so was instructional staff, about the Chesapeake Bay Restoration Fund, that we received a grant award for $13,400. That grant is going to send all of our fourth graders to Blandy. In order to send them, we're going to need transportation costs, and that's the $16,000 that was included in the operating fund. Also, every 5 years, we like to do a communications plan to get out and get responses back from our parents, students, and staff about how well we're doing. The last one we did was in 2014 and 15, so it's time for us to do it again, long past due. That cost is $24,000, and I'll just pause a little bit in case Dr. Humber wants to talk a little bit about that.
I do. And as I've been getting out into the community and as I've been speaking with many of you and for those that are at home, communication is very important to me, and engaging in the community is very important. And yes, it is going to be part of my entry plan, but as I mentioned, it needs to go beyond that entry plan. So we're taking a look at some ways of how we can engage with with parents and with other stakeholders in our community that is very important as we work through this process and beyond the budget process. There's a lot of information that we want to make sure that we're considering all aspects of our community. So I'm looking forward to what this communication study can do for us and provide us some additional information because we're willing to do it. We had 3 very successful town halls. We're trying to get the message out that just come one, come all, and we're going to be doing more town halls throughout the course of every year about topics that are coming up and engaging, and as I mentioned, to get feedback so we can continue to make Frederick County the best school division in the Commonwealth. So thanks, everybody, and looking forward to additional feedback from this study.
Also included in the operating budget is $7,500. This is to kind of help HR when they're doing all this recruiting to maybe, we're at the point of, because of that turnover, is maybe doing some digital type of putting things out on the internet, having to pay for advertisements, that sort of thing to try to recruit more people. Also, it may include some of this funds is for maybe some overtime for our staff there in HR to get people in at the last minute to get them ready and set up as new employees so they're ready to start this new school year. Next, I want to talk briefly about the baseline budget. We always call that the cost to stand still. So just want to give you that. As you know, it's a net reduction of $1.6 million. So here's what's included in that number. We had 1.6 less in our federal grants, meaning ESSER funds, CARES funds, those sort of things, COVID relief funding, basically. We had 1.9 less dealing with the bonus, the salary bonus that the state gave us last year. It's not going to be in the current year. We have $2 million less in salary and benefits due to turnover. Because we're having some vacancies lasting longer, we like to project what that turnover savings is so we can go ahead and account for that in the upcoming budget. We have 1.6 more in health insurance costs. We've talked a little bit about that, and we'll talk about it probably next week or the following week about the health insurance fund itself, which is a separate fund from operating. But that 1.6 of the employer portion is in this cost to stand still. We have $900,000 because we're expecting our NREP payment to increase due to our enrollment and the cost of the salary increase for our NREP staff. $600,000 more in facilities preventive and general maintenance. $200,000 of that is for preventive maintenance, and you'll see that later on as when Mr. Chrisman gives his presentation as well. $500,000 in fuel. As you know, our fuel costs are going up. Our Fund 45, our consolidated services, we sell fuel from that fund to Fund 50, so we're charging our transportation department for their fuel, and that then, because of that increase, we're accounting for that in our operating fund. And then lastly, we're increasing each high school line of $10,000 to each for band for equipment replacement, because what we're finding is that band equipment is very expensive. And it's very hard for our principals to find money to buy those tubas in their budget. So we're going to increase their line item so that they then can start buying those every year for students. And then that nets out to the 1.6 reduction. Any questions there? Dr. Hummer, next on the presentation is the county budget scenarios, but if you would like for us to come back to this and let Mr. Chrisman go up, we can do that, because that's a different presentation, or we can stick with this one and let you go forward.
Yeah, what's the will of the board? What would you like?
We can go through those scenarios real fast. Yeah, we can go through those scenarios real fast.
Okay, great. So I had the opportunity to participate in the Board of Supervisors work session last night, and this was on the docket for discussion. Mr. Bohofer started off with discussing all the aspects of Frederick County in regards to all of the needs, and then they discussed the different tax scenarios in regards to additional revenue that would be going towards the county in regards to meeting the needs that were outlined for each of the entities of Frederick County. Now, as you can see, there are 3 different scenarios. Currently, the tax rate is 61 cents. And I want to also share that, keep in mind that this is from the county. This is not from Frederick County Public Schools. This is just information that I'm sharing with what they shared last night. And if you do have additional questions, or if you want to learn more about this process, I would strongly encourage you to talk with your representative, Board of Supervisor, or attend those meetings. But essentially, you have each different scenario here of 55 cents, 57 cents, or what's called revenue neutral, which would be no increase. Currently, the tax rate is at 61 cents, but based on assessments, that rate is now established at the 51 cent, is what would be revenue neutral, where there would be no increases across the county. So they cannot go above what is advertised, which they were discussing that yesterday, and they agreed upon the 61 cents, and then they can always discuss coming down from that. But if they would have established it at 51 cents, since that was what would be advertised, they could not go above that. So if you take a look at scenario A at the 55 cents, there's other areas of our county that are very important, but for this conversation, if you want to go down to the bottom there would be a shortfall of $3.8 million. So we would have to prioritize what areas that we would want to keep in our budget, and we would have those discussions through this committee. And then we would present that back to the board in regards to what items would be cut to accommodate for that shortfall. For scenario B, that would be 57 cents, and that would be less of an impact, and that would be about $888,000. And again, we would have to come back and discuss which items that we would need to cut to, again, meet what our proposed budget would be. So we'd have to come back and take a look at that. The biggest impact, if you take a look at scenario C, which as I mentioned would be that revenue neutral, which would be staying at that 51 cent, it would be a significant impact for the schools because we would not receive any additional revenue from our locality, and we would be coming back and we would have to have some serious conversations about what we would do to continue to support our staff and support our students. So we're hoping for scenario A. Scenario B, scenario B, we're hoping for. Scenario A, we would, again, make it work, but scenario C would be pretty significant for the school division. There is going to be a lot of conversations at the Board of Supervisors meeting, so I encourage the public, I encourage you to get there and be a voice for us and advocate, and please let us know if there's any questions, and we can definitely talk those through. And then the vote will come. I think they were kind of going back and forth on what the vote is going to be. They did extend it. Again, this is all public information. They did extend it to, I want to say, April 19th to wait for the 7th member to be voted on. But they were talking yesterday about maybe going back on that date. So again, pay attention to the board meetings in regards to what that looks like. But they have to vote on what that final cost will be, and that will decide what the tax rate will be and how much money we will receive. One other thing I would like to mention, Mr. Chairman, I know it came up at the last meeting about when my presentation is going to be to the Board of Supervisors, and I'm currently working with Mr. Bohofer on that, and they're currently working out a date for when that's going to happen. And then we're also currently working on having some more joint conversations with some Board of Supervisors along with some school board members and myself. So that is something that we're currently working on with Mr. Bohofer.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hummer. Moving forward.
Okay, if there's no questions, then Mr. Chrisman will come up and do his capital projects fund.
Good afternoon. Be okay. Just want to get us started. You started at the beginning. Okay, good. Good afternoon. I don't know how I feel about being at the very end of the presentations. I guess you saved the best for last, but I do appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you today about, we don't get that opportunity too often. Once a year, we get to discuss it a little bit. Before I begin, I want to make sure that everybody understands the hard work that's done by finance. Dr. Abbey was deeply involved with the capital asset plan this year. Takes a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of energy. It is a little bit different this year, so we're going to talk about how it's changed a little bit, and I think it's much better than what it was. So I think we're in a good place. The benefits of the capital, what I'm going to talk about is the benefits of the capital asset plan. I'm going to define what's preventive maintenance as opposed to asset replacement. We'll talk about how we determine priority levels and cost of projects, how it fits in with the superintendent's budget and our request, and we'll talk about the layout of the document itself. Benefits of the capital asset plan ensures a safe and healthy school environment by making sure that we're covering things environmentally in our classrooms and everything. That's more of a preventive maintenance thing. But we are glad to say that we are in a very good spot right now with that, because we have schedules that we've been following for quite a few years. With additional monies that we've received for preventive maintenance, which we'll talk about in just a minute, we've been able to further our effort on that. COVID obviously was a big deal for us environmentally, so having those extra funds has been a real benefit to get us back where we need to be. Capital asset plan extends the life expectancy of equipment and delays the need for costly replacements. We've always done a good job of keeping our buildings healthy as far as the actual internal systems, HVAC, and things like that. We've always done a good job of that. We've kept our buildings running efficiently. We're one of the most efficient school divisions in the state, and we have been for the last 10 years. So we're doing very well on those things. And we have spent a lot of time keeping our older equipment in running condition. We try to minimize untimely system failures by being ahead of the game, trying to do predictive maintenance as well as preventive maintenance. And it enables our department to plan, purchase materials, and schedule workloads. So that saves time, money, and labor. Decreases the number of major repairs. Well, that's true most of the time. We ran our systems pretty much 24/7 during COVID. So our older systems we did have an impact on our older systems. We changed filters at a more frequent pace, which helped, but we have had some major repairs because of that, because our systems were old. We ran them to the max, and some of them didn't make it, but we're in good place. Provides long-range financial planning to facilitate long-term funding strategy, which is the basis of the CAP itself. Preventive maintenance. When we say conveying systems, we're talking about elevators, chair lifts, flooring, those types of things. So we have to keep those things on preventive maintenance. A lot of those things, in particular elevators, have inspections due. We have to update. We have 3 elevators that are being updated this year. So we're trying to stay ahead of that game. That's critical for our special needs children that have mobility issues. So we try to keep those in good shape. Electrical service and distribution, we do have a project this year at Dow J. Howard. Interior finishes, ceiling, floor, and wall. And those things would include things like carpeting. We do have a painting schedule. We're going to try to paint Millbrook High School this year, the entire school. That's a huge undertaking. We've never done anything that big before, and we're going to try to get it done in 6 weeks. That's huge. So we'll be working on that extended hours with a lot of moving of furniture and things like that, but we're going to get it done. Plumbing fixtures. We have a couple of schools that we are going to replace some plumbing fixtures in. They're original to the buildings. They're our older buildings. We have done lead testing and things like that, but it's time to replace those. With more modern fixtures, a lot of them are still just knobs, so we need to replace that. Pothole repair, asphalt sealing, and line painting. Man, we are doing a great job with that. The last couple of years, if you've driven around, you've probably seen some of the improvements at Apple Pie Ridge, Sharando High School. We did the entire overlay there 2 years ago, and we just continue that. That is on a schedule. We did get behind a few years ago, which increased our repair, but we're now doing a lot of sealing and line painting and making sure everything's maintained properly so we get a little bit more life out of it. So we're doing good with that as well. All of those items are really on a schedule. Asset replacement is a little bit different. Occurs when the equipment or system is no longer operational, or parts aren't available anymore, or repairs are not cost beneficial. We're running into this a little bit on HVAC parts because of an incredible increase in cost on parts. So some of these things that used to be, we would go in and maybe repair a compressor or replace a compressor in a unit. We're now finding that the compressor cost more than 3/4 of the cost of replacing the entire unit, so we're replacing the entire unit. So it's a cost-benefit kind of thing for us. Asset replacement includes electrical lighting, fire protection, HVAC, and all those projects are in our program this year. PA systems, and including stage lighting. Rob's done some stage lighting last year. That helped out a lot. Parking lots, roofing, site development, playground equipment, and stadium bleacher replacement. How we determine the priority levels, number one, of course, is safety. We want to keep the kids safe when they enter our buildings. They're ours for the day. We want to make sure that we put them back on the bus for John to deliver them safely home, and we want mom and dad to have them in the same condition they left in the morning, maybe a little bit better. Well-fed, well taken care of, and a safe return back home. Thank you, John. Legal compliance, we have a lot of things that happen because EPA, ADA, VDOT, OSHA mandates, and mandates from the state too that's not on here. Further damage or deterioration could lead to loss of facility. If we don't repair a roof, it could lead to a lot of the envelope of the building is incredibly important. If we don't repair that roof, we could lose some, maybe some furniture or interior tile can pop, those types of things, so we need to address that immediately. And it needs to, we also look for cost effectiveness, return on investment, energy savings, and that's really lighting. We have some older system lightings. We only have about 5 more buildings to take care of in that. We did some lighting replacements a few years ago, but when COVID hit, we kind of put that on a back shelf. We need to return to that and get those things taken care of. Level 2 is projects deemed close to failure within the near future, next couple of years. We're trying to predict that we need to get it done before it fails, or it's near obsolescence. Level 3 is diminishing effectiveness or efficiency. When we get, or really like to talk about level 2, when we get to a situation, because there's a couple of projects we'll talk about that really fall in level 2, but they also have level 1 concerns. When we get to a situation where our main supplier is eBay, then we got a problem. So especially if it's on a critical system. And we've done that quite often. And that tells us that we need to move forward on replacing a piece of equipment, especially when it's something like life safety equipment like fire alarm system. And we had that at James Wood before we replaced that. We were buying, what we did was we went on eBay and we bought everything possible for that system that was in existence. So we were getting 7 smoke detectors here, we were getting a couple other things over here, pull stations, and making it last until we got it done. But we got it done eventually, and we're okay now. How do we determine costs associated with the CAP? We use School Dude Capital Forecast software, and we also back it up and check it with RS Means data construction estimating tool. Quite honestly, right now, those are a little shaky because the algorithms aren't watching close enough. We don't get updates close enough to see what's happening in the markets. So when your HVAC equipment goes up 68% and you're using old data, you got a problem. So what we've been doing recently is we've been making sure that we either have engineering backup on them. We talk to our vendors to make sure that we're in line with what they think that a job would cost. And we use what jobs we are currently working on or have worked on in the near past with a little bit of inflation calculation in it. And we've been doing pretty good with that. We have bids all over the place, but we're doing pretty good at holding our own on keeping our bids in the estimated budget. So we're doing pretty good with that. Like that kind of summarizes that entire slide, so I'll move on. 24 budget requests for preventive maintenance. These are already funded. This is more information to let you know what we're going to be doing this year with those funds. We have about $1.2 million of funds to spend. So you can see we're taking a look at refinishing some gym floors that are desperately needed. Most of those gym floors haven't been touched since the buildings were built. In fact, other than Jameswood Middle, it covers all of them. And if you've been to Jameswood Middle School lately, you'll see why we're going to refinish that gym floor. Dale J. Howard Center, there's been a lot work done on that building over the last couple years. There's some issues in the electrical system we need to take care of. We may be able to gain back some of the capacity in that system, which would be real helpful because the panels are very full. So if we can pull back some of that capacity and have that for future projects, that would be a great thing. We're also going to replace the plumbing fixtures, Dow J. Howard. They, other than the addition that was done and the small renovation that was done a few years ago, those are original fixtures, so we need to get some of those out of there. The track resurfacing at Jameswood Middle School has been on the charts for quite a while. That track is in really bad shape. It's really not good for competition, and there are some safety concerns on that with the cracks that are in it. But we'll also pave all the way from the gate back to the track so that walking surface that goes back there will be okay for the kids to walk on. Middletown Elementary School, again, the plumbing fixtures are original to the building, so they're now 30 years old. We did replace the ones at Armel, found greater efficiencies there, and it helped us with some of our lead and copper testing. Millbrook High School, asphalt repair, partial. And the reason that it's partial is because there's a lot of asphalt at Millbrook High School. So we're going to do it in 2 bites, one each year. So you'll see that on the list for next year too. In Rep Cincinnati Road, conveying systems. When you see that, sometimes you'll see in that, when I talk about conveying systems, it might include asbestos abatement. There's some asbestos tile at in Rep Cincinnati Road that we'd like to take care of. And they've asked us for a few things as far as access from the outside that will be taken care of there too. It too has original plumbing fixtures from the 1970s. Sharando High School interior finishes walls. We're doing Millbrook this year. We're hoping we learn enough that we can do Sharando easily next year. So that's on our look ahead. Our request for asset replacement capital projects fund, we definitely need to take a look at building automation. Our systems are behind in technology to the point where our purveyors are saying they're no longer going to support our systems. So we need to take a look at that. That's a big job. There's $2 million in it this year, $2 million in it next year, because that's what's going to take to the entire division. But it's desperately needed. As an example, a little bit of a example is we're replacing the system at Jameswood High School in the construction project. It's moving from Pritchett controls to Siemens. The Siemens, that system, we need to get our front end, which does all the scheduling and managing of those systems. We need to get that in place so that we can connect to that new equipment up there. In other words, they're upgrading to a different system. We need to upgrade with it in order to communicate with it. Apple Pie Ridge Elementary School, need to replace the boilers. Both boilers were replaced in 1994, I think it was. It was either 94 or 97. Both of them have had heat exchangers that have been repaired inside of the boilers, and their time. We're a little nervous this year on those boilers, but we've made it through. It's been a pretty tame winter for us, so we're in good shape, but we'd like to replace them next year. Fire alarm replacement, and you'll see that several times, and really the answer to those are the same. Those are old fire alarms. If there was an addition done, it was piggybacked onto the old system. So we actually, in some of these schools, have 2 systems in operation and a more modern one. So we'll upgrade it so that it can accommodate the newer system, but they definitely need to be replaced. These are items that we cannot find parts for, or the parts are scarce enough that if we have a major problem over there, we would need to shut down the school, try to find a panel that was comparable or compatible, which is going to be very difficult to do, or replace the system. So rather than waiting for it to be a major catastrophe, we'd like to go ahead and do them. Apple Pie Ridge Elementary School still has T12 lighting in it. T12 lighting has mercury in the bulbs, so we have to handle those a little bit differently than the other bulbs that we have in the school systems. It's inefficient. It's been on the plan since 2012 to replace, and we haven't done it yet because it always falls down on the priority list. But it's time we do it. It will pay for itself in a couple of years with newer technology, with LED replacements. We have to take the bulbs from there, we crush them into a 55-gallon drum, we seal the drum, it's got a HEPA filter on it so that none of the dust comes back out or mercury comes back out, goes into that, and then we have to send it to a certified EPA landfill. And so we have to do that through a contractor. So you can imagine, and the bulbs are expensive anyway. They've increased almost 300% in the last 10 years. So you buy them at an accelerated price, you put them in, they don't last very long, you take them out, you crush them, and then you pay to get rid of them. So it's really not a very efficient system. And we're paying an increased electrical bill to keep them. So, you know, it's not a win there. We need to get it where it needs to be. So you'll see a couple of retrofit lightings on here. You'll see them next year as well. Armo Elementary School fire alarm replacement, same vintage, 30-year-old fire alarm system. The building wiring renovation is actually, those are projects for Mr. Yost, and that's premise wiring for computer network. So he can talk to you about those. He knows a lot more about that stuff than I do. Bass Hoover Elementary School still has an original gas boiler and water heater, 1970s edition. Dow J. Howard Center, chiller and water heater replacement. The chiller there, a little bit of an anecdote, the chiller there is actually a Frankenstein unit that was built by one of our technicians back about 8 years ago. He took 3 different chillers, he put them together because the chiller broke down. He put them together and he got it working again. Well, we've never replaced it, and that was about 8 years ago. So we need to take care of that. Fire alarm replacement there, there's 2 systems there. Currently, James Wood Middle School, this has been on here before, stadium bleacher replacement. We've done all we can to patch that and make that safe for those kids to be on. But if you go out there and you take a look at it, you know that they're not safe. I invite you to go out and take a look. We need to do something with that, and it needs to be brought up to the standards of the other middle schools. So we're requesting that again. Track restoration at James Wood Middle School, we talked about that a little bit, getting that back in shape so they can have competition on that. Middletown Elementary, building wire renovation, again, Mr. Yost's in. Millbrook High School, tennis court resurfacing. We're almost, but not quite, in the same shape we were with Sharando a couple years ago, where we had to do major things with the tennis courts out there, many hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're trying to fend that off with a repair right now for about half the price of what we spent at Sharando. So we're trying to get that before it gets worse. In rep, gas boiler and water heater replacement, those are original to the building. Retrofit lighting, again, it's T12. Orchard View Elementary School, cooling tower needs to be replaced, severe leaks. The water bill is more than what we want to pay. We were on a well, so it wasn't quite as important as it is now that we're on county water. Sharando High School, track resurface. Jason Barber's requested that because there's a chance that we won't be able to have district and higher competitions on it. Stonewall Elementary School boiler replacement, 1997. That's original to this school, and the fire alarm as well. So that's our list. It's a big list, but all very needed projects. And it's just, we really need to do those. Some of those projects were scheduled for last year, and we didn't get any local funding, did we, from last year for capital projects?
Not in the budget, but we got the 1 million carry
Yeah, yeah. So they're on the list again this year. So you've seen the design of the document is, it follows kind of what we went by. You'll see budget requests. You'll see the operating fund and capital projects funds. They're on page 5 and 6. Capped by system, capped by location. That's just for convenience for you to look things up to see how you want to look at the data. It's the same data, just in a different format. Capital improvements plan is included this year, as well as John Grubbs has put in some bus data. And there's a glossary of terms. And that's it. It's a lot of information. Again, I want to thank the people that helped us with it this year. I think what you're going to find this year is this document is more forward-looking than it has been in the past. It's time for us to quit looking behind, start looking forward, getting these things taken care of. I can't tell you, because of ESSER funding and state funding and the projects that have been approved over the last couple of years, we're starting to see daylight. We didn't see it 2 or 3 years ago. There was no daylight. We were overwhelmed. The capital projects have been incredibly beneficial for us, but on the maintenance side of things, we're starting to realize the benefits of what's been done to a point where we're starting to see that there's a light at the end of the tunnel that we're trying to reach. So if we can continue doing the jobs that we're doing, we'll be in good shape in a few years.
Mr. Chrisman, I've got a quick question for you.
Yes, sir.
Could you just explain to me, when you resurface something, so track resurface, tennis court resurface, track restoration, that's really, is that just putting a cap on top of what is already there? That's not like, what's the difference between that and then just total replacement?
Yes, it's what we use American tennis courts most of the time to do our projects, and they come in, they assess our biggest issue is the cracks. So if we can do enough, if we can take it down far enough that we can mitigate the cracks and get a good base on it, we never take it down past the base. So there will be times when it's in bad enough shape, we're trying to avoid that. We're trying to get it before it gets to that point, because that is quite an expense. So we're trying to get it to where it can be taken down a level and just redone.
And typically, when you do a resurface, and I know tennis courts are different than a track resurface, what's the lifespan of a resurface?
You can expect those to go about 15 years or so before you start. You need to take care of them in the meantime. You need to make sure that they're sealed, repainted, and those types of things, but you can get 15 years.
Okay. And I know Jameswood Middle needs some work over there.
Yeah, it does. We're trying to get that spruced up a little bit.
Yeah.
That was our flagship school.
Yes, sir.
It would be nice if we doesn't have to be a flagship stadium, but it needs to be presentable. There's a lot of memories there. I can remember, I don't know whether y'all remember or not, but I can remember years and years ago, we used to go to the Jameswood Hanley football game every year. And it alternated. One year it'd be at Hanley, one year it'd be here at Jameswood. I remember being back there, and I remember watching that football game. There was also a summer program that Parks and Recs had that was, it was a summer track and field program, and we used that stadium. So, there's memories back there, and not just for me, for almost everybody that graduated over there. It's a shame when you have something that you go out and you take a look at and you say, man, somebody ought to do something. So we're just trying to get it done.
And a lot of our schools, there's a lot of extracurricular activities outside of the school system, Little League football and things like that use that stadium on a regular basis. So it gets used quite a bit.
All the time. And it goes to safety of the kids as well.
It does.
The stadium bleachers, we really need to do something with those before somebody gets hurt. We've patched them. We've got, we're not sure what's under them. We'll find out when we start taking them out.
Does anybody have any? Yeah.
Mr. Chrisman, you referenced that several of these capital projects funds have come on to this list several times. Would you say that due to inflation that some of these project costs have increased?
Oh, certainly, certainly. And we factor that in, We try to get, the same person that gave us pricing last year, we just go back to them and say, how much more should we do that? It's materials. Materials are incredible right now, especially if they are petroleum related. So anytime you look at asphalt, track surfacing, tennis courts, price is up because the petroleum costs are up. They're all petroleum products.
So we risk having a more costly capital projects fund if we delay
Oh,
longer.
certainly. Oh, certainly. It happens all the time. We recognize, I think that the key here is, on this particular group of projects, the key is really safety for the kids. You got to factor that in. The cost, yes, the cost is there, the cost increase is there, but there is a safety factor there that you need to address. So I would put that ahead of the cost. I would like to say, yeah, sure, you should do it because it's cheaper, but the problem really is safety, and you really need to address that. And what price do you pay for that? You got to get it done.
Right, there's not a price to pay for safety in
No.
our schools. Another question. I think that you work very closely with the capital improvements plan. Historically, the Fourth High School and the Sharando High School renovation and expansion, can you elaborate on how long that's been presented, not only to the board, but also to the Board of Supervisors?
It would be an amateur answer if I did that. So I would defer to someone else because that isn't in my purview. I do sit in on those conversations because they want to know what needs to be done and what we've already done in our projects. But really, that's a question that maybe Ms. Camry can answer.
Yeah, if you look on, in this book, actually, your capital asset plan, on page 58, you'll see that the Fourth High School went before the Board of Supervisors for funding in April 2017.
Okay. Ms. Camry, do you have any information on how much it cost when it first went before them?
I'm taking a guess, I think it was like 84 million.
And it looks like now we're looking at a price tag of 137 million, 400 million. So that's around a difference of almost $50 million delaying over 7 years. So in order to save 94,000, we've cost 50-some million dollars. And I think we've got Sharando as early as,
Yeah, it first appeared on the CIP for 2012 to 2017, so it was on the CIP at that time, but not
2012.
funding.
in 2012. Okay, so this information has been repeatedly presented to the Board of Supervisors for almost 10 years, as we're talking about Sharando, and then I think, how many years? We're going on 7 now.
Yeah, when it was in the CIP for Sharando, it was a listed project there. The funding itself wasn't sought because we usually go after the top 3 projects, but it was listed and attention was given to it. If
Okay.
that helps.
Thank you.
Any other questions for me? Yes, sir.
If I may, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, I'm kind of scattered. I've got them in a few places. So looking through this book, just making sure that I'm accurate on here, we are looking at, and maybe this is Ms. Camry, with ESSER 3 funds, the ARML HVAC, correct?
Yes, sir.
Because I didn't see that one.
It is.
Listed in here, but that is.
That's why it's not there.
Okay, perfect. And then, but even as a recent, I guess because it hasn't started yet, that's why it's not in that section. When I was also looking in this, the HVAC system, and maybe this is a question I can ask you later at Buildings and Grounds, but we've got Bass Hoover Elementary at $3 million for the HVAC, but then Middletown the year after is $6 million. Is it just a different scope, different things that need to be covered in that, or?
Yes, sir.
Okay, because it seems like
It's a different type system.
different type system. Okay. And then I had another question for you regarding the budget specifically. 1.2 million, I'm sure you have more needs than that. But when I look at the budget breakdown, where we've got the facilities section, I see the 1.2 in there. There's also 7.7 million in capital outlay replacement. Can you,
Yes, sir. That's the ESSER for ARML.
So that's, okay, because
Yes.
we have to,
Yes, put it in there so we can spend it. Yes.
Yep, perfect. So I don't see a line item in here for just other stuff. Like if you have a school that calls you and says, hey, our floor cleaning machine isn't working, where does money for that type of thing, just ongoing stuff throughout the year that each building might need, leaf blowers, that the little kind of stuff that we need to keep up our facilities, where is that reflected in the budget?
Well, where it's reflected in the budget, I'll let Ms. Camry address.
Okay.
It's usually the 1-800-HELP-US for finance, the phone call. So sometimes Mr. Chrisman may see some savings in some of his preventive maintenance or things that he has in his list. So then he can restructure some of that money to look at little items like a $10,000 charge or that sort of thing. But also the school itself may have funds that they could reach out and ask Mr. Chrisman that they have some available funds near the end of the year to pay for things. Otherwise, he can call finance, and then if there's other savings that we have discovered, then we push it to him for him to spend.
So there's no just kind of,
There is a general operating
There is a general
budget.
operating.
Under operations and maintenance category. So there's
In
a
a different
facilities
category.
and operations and maintenance.
so there is some money there to pull
Yes,
from?
Some.
yes.
Because I was like, I don't
Yes.
see anything.
Looking to
Okay.
purchase services, yes, and materials and supplies and operations and maintenance.
Okay, thank you. And do you feel like within that and with the 1-800-HELP method, do you feel like you have, when one of your schools or one of your people calls you and says, hey, I have this need, do you feel like you're able to get what you need to support, your people there and get them the things they need for their buildings?
You're not going to trap me with this one, Mr. Comstock.
I'm not trying to trap you, please. No, sir, I'm not trying to
I
trap
can
you.
always
I'm
use
just,
more money.
Yeah.
But it is a budget.
Yeah.
We are staying within the budget. It helps me incredibly on the maintenance side if we take care of these issues on the capital asset side.
Right.
Because I had a full-time person at Jameswood High School for 3 years. We got $250,000, I think, a year in capital money to spend on just HVAC alone. I'm sending all my resources there, and it's not working well. It's not effective. So if you go ahead and replace those things like we're doing with the capital project up there now, it lightens my load considerably.
Absolutely.
So right now, we're fighting the battle over here, trying to get everything up and running properly, good equipment in place. My directive to my guys is do not bandage it, do not patch it, fix it for a long-term repair. So that when we get over here, we lighten that load, and I've got the resources here that aren't quite as, they're not going out and hitting those one-on-one types of problems because equipment's failing, because we're taking care of it over here. So it's kind of balancing out now. Wasn't before. We were struggling. We're not struggling as badly anymore. It's the improvements we've done over the last few years through ESSER, through what's been given to us for the capital projects and things, has had a remarkable effect on the operation of our schools. So it's working. We just have a little bit further to go. Yeah. So I'm kind of hoping that we don't keep, like last year, not getting the full benefit of fixing those things,
Right.
because we're so close. And, I'd like to see that happen.
Absolutely. I appreciate all the work that went into this, and I appreciate that it is so forward-thinking in terms of projecting those needs, because that's something that we hear often. Do a better job taking care of what you got. Well, this is what we need to take care of what we've got.
Oh, sure.
So I appreciate your work on that and everyone's work on that. So
Not a problem.
thank you, sir.
And on top of that, we only have so much duct tape,
Right.
Well, that went up too. You'd be surprised what's in my budget, Mr. Comstock. I pay for the utility bills.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that the economy of scale, when paper products takes a 15% increase, and you're buying toilet paper and paper towels for, 26 facilities, and, that's not a small thing. And that's something, that results in a considerable amount of money that we have to find someplace else to get that money from in order to cover it, because the budget year's set. So those quick things are crazy. We have to watch our spending. And we do. We watch it very closely.
I really am surprised that we've got Mercury lighting in Apple Pie Ridge. That
5 schools.
5.
It was okay 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that, we looked at T8s for a long time. because they don't have quite as much mercury in them, and we did some retrofitting there, but really LED came into, when Evendale was built, we did a little bit of, or when we did the expansion on Evendale, we looked at LED lighting. It was still difficult to make the margins work, to make the, make it pay for itself, but now it's extremely easy.
But what you've got to do with those light bulbs after their useful life is pretty,
If you think about it, custodian has to put them in the boxes that we send
yeah, I
them.
know.
They got to send them back to us. We got to skid up them. We
That's
got
it.
to crush them. We got to,
Yeah.
it's crazy. Okay.
Thank you so much, Mr. Crispin.
Thank you, Mr. Crispin.
It was a wonderful talking with you.
Mr. Chair, if I could?
Yes, ma'am.
Also, I wanted to point out, too, within your capital asset plan, we did add a little bit of technology also under the tab for the first time, and that's what Mr. Crispin was referring to. And Mr. Yost is here if you want to ask him any questions about the building wiring.
Any board
There were
members
two
have-
projects
Yeah.
in that list. And, oh, I'm sorry, the technology in the cap is page 59. And it was just the building wiring. We're hoping to expand out the technology piece to include Chromebooks in the future, or touchscreen, those kind of things, but we have to start small and build it up.
Thank you so much. Any other members have any other questions, comments? Do you have anything? You sure? Okay. With that, do I have?
Mr. Chairman, do you mind
ahead.
if I have two things that I wanted to mention to kind of add to what Mr. Crispin was saying, as well as Mrs. Camry? We have a very competent staff that does a really good job of assessing what we call our assets. And as you can see, as Mr. Crispin did a really good job of explaining, is we have a lot of items that get used on a regular basis. I was posed a question on my very first week on the job about asking me, why are we replacing our school operational type items more frequently than other buildings that are around the community? And my answer is, well, because these buildings stay open pretty much 24/7. They have 14,000 kids that come in and out of the doors every day. And the equipment that is utilized in each of these buildings is utilized a lot more frequently than other buildings throughout the community. I trust our staff, I trust our finance office to make sure that we are efficiently using our funds as they've mentioned, but also we do not have a crystal ball to determine all the items that could potentially go wrong as they come up throughout the course of the year. We do the best job that we can to make sure that we account for that, but our teams do a really good job to make sure that we can account for items that might be closer to the end of their shelf life, or items that may have broken or need to be replaced a lot sooner than we wanted to anticipate. What I will share, if we do not update the items as outlined in our capital projects, we are going to have to replace these items a lot sooner than we would like to, as Mr. Crispin well said. And I know we just joked about the duct tape, but there are some situations where we are utilizing duct tape to keep things together. That is not an exaggeration. So we want to make sure that we are fixing those items and we're utilizing our funds appropriately, because as he said, it will impact our operating budget in the long run if we don't fix those things through capital projects. So thank you to Mr. Crispin. Thank you to our amazing finance office and all of our other staff that have put a lot of work into this, because this is a really big deal and we want to make sure that we get all of our items that we need. And the last thing I want to say with this before I jump to my last statement is, keep in mind, is these items are necessary. I want to say that again. These items are necessary that we have proposed. This isn't a want. If we had a want, it would be a lot more, because there's a lot of things that we want to do as outlined in our strategic plan, as outlined in our goals for our students to respond to the growth and to respond to all the plans that we have for our students. So there are things that we want to get better with how we are spending our money to be more efficient, true, but there are some things that we want to expand so that we can meet the goals that we've established for our students and for our community. I had a chance to visit the Winchester Airport groundbreaking yesterday, and it was an amazing experience because I got to talk with a lot of our community stakeholders. And if you have a chance to look into that project, it is going to bring a lot of opportunities, not only for our community, but for our students in regards to job opportunities and growth to this area. And we need to prepare for that. And in order to prepare for that, we have to fund it, as I presented to you all 3 weeks ago now. Crazy to believe that that was 3 weeks ago now, right? But we have to plan for that because we want to invest in our students and we want to prepare for that growth, so we're not coming tomorrow saying we need a fourth high school when we needed it 10 years ago. So I just want to make sure, and that's going to be something that I will continue to work on and present. We're going to have a lot more conversations about it. But again, I just wanted to make mention of that. The last thing is I'm going to strongly recommend and encourage our board to continue to provide questions in regards to our budget so that when we come to March 21st, that we have all of our questions out of our system so that we're able to move forward and approve a budget and be on the same page in regards to what that looks like. So if there's additional things that you want us to consider, if there's additional things that you would like to see added, please send those questions forward because we want to address those questions. That's what the whole purpose of these finance and budget committee meetings are, is so we can have these conversations and we can add those items on because it is going to put a lot of pressure on us come March 21st. If there's some things that want to get added on, that's fine if it does, but then we have to go back to our staff to add those on, and there's timelines that we have to meet with presenting it to the Board of Supervisors, because as you all know, they are going to be providing the additional funds for the items that we need. So I just want to make sure that we can get those questions out of the way, so come March 21st, it could be mainly just questions about what's in the budget, not necessarily adding or taking away, but again, just a recommendation, totally up to you all in regards to how we do that. But I think that will help us out in the long run in regards to having a unified front with our Board of Supervisors. So thanks again, and if you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.
Before we finish up, I do want to say thank you again to the Finance Department, Mr. Chrisman, Mr. Grubbs, everybody who's involved with putting all this information together, Dr. Angelo, Dr. Abby. The information you guys have provided us this year has just been very beneficial in the way that we've worked at, streamlining it. So really appreciate everybody's help, and thank you. We don't have anything else. Mr. Comstock?
Take a motion to adjourn. We're meeting next week again?
Yes, we will be meeting next week.
Perfect.
Okay.
I'll try to get my last round of questions to you. Motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, guys.